Andrew has been stripped of his title of prince and made to leave his lavish home. What will happen to him now? Does this mean the scandal is over, or that there's more to come? Will Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie keep their titles? And what next for Fergie, now that she has lost all of her royal trappings too? We are bringing you an emergency episode today. Hello and welcome to a special episode of Palace Confidential, which we're recording after the news that King Charles has stripped Prince Andrew of all his titles and kicked him out of his mansion, Royal Lodge. Here to discuss all this is royal biographer and Daily Mail columnist Robert Hardman. Welcome, Robert.
Hello, Jo.
To bring you up to date with the news, just as we published our regular Thursday episode of Palace Confidential, Buckingham Palace released this statement. It was extraordinary. His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His lease on Royal Lodge has to date provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Now, Robert Hardman, obviously the word historic gets used a lot, but this is really seismic, isn't it?
Yeah, this is, it genuinely is unprecedented. I mean, we'll get down into some of the detail in a minute, but for the king to take away the birthright of his brother, to de-prince him, if you like, to take away these honours.
Well, it was just last week that you and I were sort of saying we can't imagine that would happen.
No, I didn't. I mean, I'm genuinely surprised because what you're effectively doing is you're putting Andrew on a par with enemies of the state. I mean, the last people to have these things removed were actually traitors, proper bona fide traitors, and that's where he's being put. So it is an extraordinary response. I think this is it's clearly the most significant decision the king has taken as king, but I think for the monarchy, we really need to go back to 1992 and the annus horribilis, as the Queen called it, to find a sort of equally significant moment, because this is not just a case of the royal family kind of knuckling down and getting on with it and hoping it goes away, or standing by existing tradition and convention. They've changed the rules. They have changed. There's constitutional innovation going on here to resolve a family problem.
But it feels, from the outside looking in, rather knee-jerk for such a big thing. But is that the case? What do you think has been the motivation for the king to finally make this, as you say, unprecedented push?
Well, I think a number of factors. As everything to do with Prince Andrew and the Jeffrey Epstein saga, it's a sort of one thing after another. So it's hard to pinpoint one exact thing. But I think if we're looking for a kind of game-changing moment, I think actually it's our colleagues at the Mail on Sunday and that revelation, that email that showed that Andrew's alleged, his excuse, his alibi, if you like, saying that he'd severed all links with Jeffrey Epstein in 2010. Well, that's not the case. Now, if that's not true, because what the Mail on Sunday showed was that there they were chatting away by email the following year, and that creepy line about, let's play again soon.
I know.
That essentially calls into question everything else that he's said. And then when you add in all the other stuff like his proximity to alleged Chinese spies, other rows to do with money, and also the whole, the fact that everything he's doing, just by existing, he's upstaging all the good work of the monarchy. I think the king just decided, right, we've got to do something.
Yeah.
That process started a few weeks ago. We had that stopgap announcement 2 weeks ago today when it was said he will no longer use his titles. That was a sort of buying time thing. I don't think what happened last night, I don't think this new development is as an immediate response to sort of public outcry. I think it's been in the pipeline because these are complicated issues.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, we'll get onto the details, but when you look at those details, that requires a lot of work sorting that out.
What do you think about the fact that there's no comment from Andrew here? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It doesn't always go that well, as we've just discussed, but what can we read into the silence there?
I think we read into that he's taken this. There's not going to be any pushback. I mean, historically, every time Andrew had to sort of take some medicine for, he was pushed back on his days as a trade envoy, or we couldn't do this or we couldn't do that, it would normally unravel after a while. One of his favourite tactics would be to go around to see the Queen for tea on a Sunday when there'd be no officials there, and basically lean on her to sort of, undo whatever had been decided the week before.
Charm mummy.
To say, oh look, I think they've got it all wrong, and I mean the Queen, to be fair, she had to do some very tough things. I mean, I think when she effectively, stripped him of his military titles and his HRH and all that back in after his disastrous Newsnight interview, that was very, very painful for her. But clearly things had to go a good deal further, and now they have.
This sentence in the statement from the King is quite interesting. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. What can we read into that about what the palace thinks about all of this?
Well, firstly, the word censures. I mean, it's not these changes or these decisions, it's censures. It's essentially saying it's a sort of rather royal word for punishment.
Yeah.
And what it's saying is, the King is the fountain of justice, let's remember. He is essentially, the law is done in his name. Innocent till proved guilty, he has to stand by that. He can't sort of suddenly, make decisions on someone's guilt or innocence. However, what that says very clearly is, he says it, that's what he says.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's any kind of resounding family support there.
I remember in the aftermath of the Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis, there was a lot of outcry that Prince Andrew said nothing about Epstein's victims. So I thought it was really significant that in the statement from the King, they talk about the importance of the victims. Do you think that Camilla's work in this sort of areas against, campaigning for domestic violence charities, would she have been involved in that part of the statement?
I don't think she would have been. Well, I don't think she was involved in the decisions. I don't think that she's sort of been in any way egging on the King to this. But she would clearly been consulted over that wording, and she is absolutely passionate. And I've been to some of the events she's organised. Her campaign against domestic violence and violence against women, sexual violence. It's heartfelt. It's been going on a long time. It's very powerful. She did that documentary not so long ago, looking at that work. It's something just by the very nature of that sort of campaigning. Most of it happens below the radar. We don't see it because she's going to places that you can't take cameras in because these people are so traumatized. Well, but she really believes in it. So I think very, very important, those two words in there, their Majesty. It's not His Majesty, their Majesties in the statement shows that she's right behind what the King's doing.
And indeed, obviously, the Duchess of Edinburgh.
And the Duchess of
Sophie does a lot of work with sexual violence victims.
She was out in the Congo recently doing that.
So I just think it must be just have been so uncomfortable for them to be part of a family where Andrew paid a woman who says she was a victim, and he's close.
Who he'd never met.
Well, apparently not, and who is clearly great friends with people who are convicted of sex trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, everything about it is excruciating, and then, I mean, I know we talk sometimes about the optics, but on those rare occasions when we have seen. Now, Andrew, I must stop trying to call him the Duke of York or the ex-Duke of York. On those occasions, we have
Windsor.
seen Mr. Well, there is actually, interestingly, there is a debate. Is he Mr.? He does still have substantive military rank.
We'll get onto the.
We'll get onto that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, when we have seen him, as most recently at the funeral of the Duchess of Kent, there you just see someone who is completely sort of tin-eared. Lack of any self-awareness. I mean, it's a funeral. He's the embarrassing sort of pariah. He's the ostracised.
Well,
he's sort of there under sufferance. And what's he doing?
Seemed like a big day out for Andrew.
Bouncing up and down. Let's go. I'm going to share a joke with the Prince of Wales. I'll just go and have a word with the King. You can see everyone is sort of going, oh no, it's the mad uncle.
Exactly.
And I think when people see those sort of moments, when they see him on those rare occasions, like when he turns up at Easter, although that's not going to happen anymore, I'm quite sure he will not be allowed to come to Easter with the family Easter next year. But
well, steady on. We've got Christmas to get through yet.
Well, we won't see him at that. No,
Yeah.
I mean, this is it. I mean, to begin with, he was sort of, way back when, suddenly told, right, you're not going on the balcony anymore, and he took that very badly. Then it's right, it's family occasions only. But don't forget, he's still there. He's at the coronation, wearing his garter robes, but not on the balcony. And gradually, all those things that he loves have dwindled away. And now, I mean, he really is. I mean, as the Mail says on its front page today, banished. And that's what he is.
Do you think that if Andrew had expressed any sympathy or outpouring of emotion for Epstein's victims in his Newsnight interview, do you think that things would have gone as far as they have?
Well, I think if he hadn't done the Newsnight interview in the first place, he might be in a different place now. The way he handled himself in that was disastrous. Again, this complete lack of self-awareness. I mean, it just underlined, I think, that what we've seen really throughout his adult life, which is just this sort of deplorable lack of judgment. But you're right, Joe. I mean, if he had express some sort of contrition, or not necessarily contrition. If you say you've done nothing wrong, you can't really be contrite, but you can certainly express empathy, and you can certainly express contrition for your lack of judgment to have even had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein in the first place. But famously in the Newsnight interview, he's asked, do you regret it? And he goes, well, no, not really, because of all the opportunities it offered me in the financial world. And you just think, oh, for goodness sake.
It's not a great ad for entitlement, is it?
And so, yes, I mean, that was long overdue. We had that statement 2 weeks ago, headed Prince Andrew, the one about the title. So that came from him, not from the palace. And that had, again, just had a sort of, I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as we've now discussed, when it comes from the king and the queen, different. Yes, there is definitely empathy. There is concern for that. And I have to say, I was sitting on the sofa on a rival production on BBC's Newsnight last night. I don't know what happened.
Let's gloss over that. Yes.
And it was very, very powerful watching Virginia Giuffre's brother and sister-in-law and other victims on hearing this news, and very, very moved by it, and all saying, expressing gratitude to the king. I think there's a real feeling of surprise, a pleasant surprise that the king has gone as far as he has, as quickly as he has.
Well, some people would say it took a while.
Well, when you're trying to do things like unravel centuries of sort of constitutional law, you can't just wave a magic wand. I mean, in the old days when you had a sort of autocratic medieval kings, they could just say, right, I want this done, it's done. I mean, the fact that Andrew couldn't get him out of the house because he had a lease just shows that we do live in a sort of constitutional democracy, the rule of law, where even kings can't just evict people from houses if they've got a lease.
It is staggering to think of the way that someone like Andrew has been able to move through life, because it strikes me that, you mentioned the statement that he put out where he was still sort of saying he didn't do anything wrong. That seemed to me would have been an opportune time to at least apologise for the embarrassment to the family. But that's not been forthcoming either.
No, I mean, it just goes back to this, I don't know what goes on in his head, but I mean, there is just sort of no tact, empathy. He just seems, as ever, staggeringly entitled and selfish, and you just wonder. Maybe there'll be some sort of mea culpa. Maybe he'll change his tune. But I think for now, the best place for him is in the middle of nowhere at the end of the M11 on the North Sea coast,
watching planes land and
take
off.
Golf videos.
Yeah. Last week we were talking about the King's actually historic trip to pray with the Pope in Rome, how that was overshadowed somewhat by the rumblings of the Andrew story. So do you think that they've been keen to knock this on the head, get it done before William flies to Brazil for his big week of environmental work?
I don't think that they're looking in the sort of the immediate short term. It's not a question of sort of managing next week's news. I think this has been, as I say, it's been a long time coming, because it's been a long time planning. It's been brought to a head by the news that was in the Mail on Sunday. and subsequent revelations, and I think that sort of accelerated things. But I think the main issue is just this is now gathering momentum. You have MPs in Parliament starting to say, well, I think it's time that we looked at the whole issue of the monarchy, and when you've got that sort of febrile atmosphere, you've got to move fast. And that's what he's done.
So let's look at the practicalities, because there's a lot of information. It feels like almost a blancmange of stuff going on. Tell us exactly what has been taken away from Andrew.
All the titles and honours. Titles and honours are slightly different. So, or styles, titles and honour. You've got HRH as a style. The title is Duke and Prince, and the honours are Knight of the Garter and Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order. The whole lot has gone. Now, were you doing that under the old rules? There'll be different processes for each one. It's all quite complicated. What has happened is that the king has basically exercised his royal prerogative, which is the sort of, I am the king, I will do what I like kind of thing. Obviously, through government, with parliamentary approval, government approval. He's talked to the Prime Minister about this.
Because I remember you last week saying, well, this is a very complicated thing. And then whoop, it's done.
Well, exactly. and we have seen this actually. What it slightly reminds me of is a complete tangent this, but for years and years people were saying, why can't we change the rules of succession? Because it's terribly unfair that boys trump girls, and it's ridiculous, and Catholics are discriminated against. And everybody said, I remember the Blair government, the Major government, Tories, Labour, everybody just said, it's too complicated, leave it alone, it's a can of worms, we haven't got time, it's just the way it is. And then as William and Catherine were expecting, they just got married, and it was quite clear they were going to have children, suddenly it was sort of, well, we do need to sort this out. And it was the Cameron government that got together with all the other governments of all the realms, of which the then late Queen was Queen at the time, and got them all together in a room at one summit and said, we're going to change this. Does anyone have a problem with that? And everyone went, no. So it changed. And I think sometimes when you look at the rules as they stand, they are very complicated. And they were very complicated in this instance. But what's happened is, I think the King has talked to the Lord Chancellor, or his officials have talked to the Lord Chancellor, talked to the Prime Minister, and said, well, there is a way around this. If we go down the royal warrant route, where effectively the King says, I want this to happen, it can happen, providing, of course, that Parliament and government approve. And all along, what the King has been very wary of is particularly stripping Andrew of his dukedom. It does require parliamentary time. Now, it doesn't require much parliamentary time, but it's still the principle that in a time of fairly, there's all sorts of crises going on, to have Parliament devoting a second to sorting out this tawdry business of one member of the royal family, it just looks really bad.
Well,
he wanted to not get Parliament involved, and this manages to do everything without getting Parliament involved.
Do you think that it paves the way? You were saying, we go from, this is the way we've always done things, to, okay, we're going to change this, now we're going to change this. Does this mean the next time a duke or duchess needs censuring, it'll be that much easier?
Yeah, well, it will, because the precedent has, and the monarchy always operates on precedent. They're addicted to precedents, because that's when you're a 1,000-year-old institution, you have to be. But yeah, this now sets a precedent that if a member of the family, in some way goes beyond the pale, there is now a simpler way of effectively evicting them.
Well, we'll come on to that in a minute, but let's go back to this surnames business, because it can be confusing.
Yes.
Royal surnames can change, and everyone seems to have one. And I remember famously Meghan making sure everyone knew she was now a Sussex. I didn't know that until she said it. And now Andrew's surname is Mountbatten Windsor.
Yes.
So where does that come from?
So what happened was, going back to Queen Victoria, they were the House of Hanover. She married Prince Albert, who was from the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, so it became known as the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And it carried on like that all the way up to George V. And then in the middle of the First World War, everyone's fighting Germany and thinking, well, hang on, our royal family are all a bit German. So George V says, right, we're changing the family name. And there's an internal debate, what are we going to call ourselves? And they settle on Windsor.
We now identify as English.
And so it was that the House of Windsor was laid down in 1917. It was a big deal. And that since then it has been the House of Windsor. And it carried on like that right up until the death of George VI. Suddenly you've got Elizabeth II, young queen, got two very young children. And Lord Mountbatten, who's an uncle of Prince Philip, he says, well, the House of he's overheard saying at a dinner party, the House of Mountbatten now reigns, because the Queen's husband was a Mountbatten. Churchill was very cross when he heard about this, and the Queen was basically made to issue a statement saying, no, the House of the name of the royal family remains the House of Windsor, and that really upset Prince Philip, because it was effectively saying you don't count.
Yeah.
And this is the 50s; it's very traditional time. Every other man who has children, they take his surname, but not in this case. And that's when he came out with this famous line, "I'm a bloody amoeba," and that's how the situation remained until the end of the 50s, and by this time, the Queen was in a more confident place. She was on her third or fourth Prime Minister, third, I think, by that point, and she was expecting Prince Andrew. She was having, at long last, after a 10-year gap, having another baby, and she wanted to show. It was a gesture to Prince Philip. It was a way of saying, look, you matter. I understand that you're a bit upset about this, so I'm going to change the family name again. So that's when it moved from Windsor to Mountbatten Windsor. Not for all her other cousins descended from George V, just for the Queen and Prince Philip and their children were going to be Mountbatten Windsor. And that's when it came in. So this name was triggered, if you like, was the catalyst for the change to Mountbatten Windsor, was Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
There you go. So he should be quite happy with that.
Well, I imagine there are quite a few Mountbattens out there who think, hang on, why is our name being dragged into the mix?
Oh dear.
Couldn't he have just stayed at Windsor, leave the Mountbattens out of it?
If you're watching this live across YouTube, TikTok and Facebook, hello, and thank you for joining us. And please, if you can, do press like, and it will help more people see the show. And we can't wait to answer your questions very shortly. Now, we're going to move on now to Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who will no longer be the Duchess of York, but has also been confirmed, it has, that Beatrice and Eugenie will keep their princess titles in line with King George V's letters pattern of 1917, which you just mentioned. So can you explain a bit more about how that works for them?
They are still princesses and HRH because they are the children of the son of a reigning monarch. So they're HRH Princess Beatrice, HRH Princess Eugenie. And all along there's been the king and other members of the family as well have been concerned that they are, the sins of the father do not befall them, because they're blameless. I mean, they've led a pretty upright, and all things considered, they're pretty level-headed. They're very nice young women. I mean, I've interviewed both of them for various documentaries over the years. I've watched them meeting, representing in a sort of very light way, and they don't have official roles, but they still, they'll turn up at royal events.
It must be so painful to see the characterisation of your father in this way.
Well, and both parents actually, because in recent weeks, the Duchess has been sort of dragged into this. She's now had all her. She's basically gone through what he went through in 2019. She's just gone through in the last few weeks of the handful of charities that she was still involved with. They've all just severed their links. I mean, she is now a pariah as well, because of the Mail on Sunday has been digging and has unearthed the fact that these emails between the couple and Epstein, which show that the friendship went deeper than they thought. It's
in the public interest, I think, to know that he lied on that Newsnight interview.
Yeah. I mean, this, and this is the other thing throughout, as we said at the start. All we know about the Epstein saga is it just keeps going and it keeps getting worse. So, I mean, what else is there to come? Who knows?
Well,
but on the Duchess, on that point, I mean, she is, I thought, a very telling part of what Buckingham Palace was saying last night. It's not in the statement, but in response to questions, what happens to the Duchess of York, it was made very clear the Duchess of York will make her own arrangements. So we had last week these stories about, is she going to be given a house on the estate, which I think was sort of being planted by her people as a sort of get it on the table as a bargaining chip. That's not happening. She's expected to sort herself out.
Wow. Well, we've just started a poll asking for your thoughts on whether Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie should keep their titles now that their father is being stripped of his. So viewers watching now can join in and vote. So please do that. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So far, most of you want them to keep their titles. What's your view, Robert? I think we know, but
yeah, I mean, I think they are blameless in this. It's obviously excruciating for them, but I mean, we've been happy to have them as Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie for their whole lives. I mean, it seems. I just think people would feel it was going too far if you started to sort of drag them into it in precisely the way that if the families of a fallen politician or a fallen business person or whatever it is, I think there's an understanding that you don't take it out on the kids.
What do you think their future looks like, the princesses, within the wider royal family? Will they step back from duties, or will they take on more?
I don't think they'll take on more. I mean, they don't have many. They're involved with one or two charities. They're essentially private citizens who are related to the king and occasionally turn up at royal events. But I think if there was thought about, for example, maybe they should start turning up at state banquets because the help fill up the gaps.
It's a big table, yeah.
I think maybe that perhaps either they or actually palace officials will just think twice now. I think there's probably going to be. I just don't think we'll see more of them. We'll certainly see them included in things like possibly family Christmas. I wouldn't be surprised to see them at Sandringham, family events where they and their children. They've got young families. They're in the line of succession.
But then they'll probably feel loyalty to spend Christmas with their mother and father.
Well, I mean, they're used over many years to having these rather sort of strange Christmases where the Duchess would be sort of parked down the road in a sort of in a borrowed farmhouse, and I mean, I think they've had a pretty. I mean, of course, they've had great privilege, and life's been wonderful in many ways. But I think for them, these past few weeks will have been incredibly stressful. We've
had an interesting question from Rena, who asked in our live chat: Will Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie still be known as Princesses of York, or just Princess, seeing as the House of York is no more, or at least dormant?
This is actually that's an interesting question, and because of the way this has been done, because they've effectively changed the rules. I wouldn't say make up the rules, but they have effectively created new rules. Those new rules include the fact that their titles remain the same, so they are Princesses of York, although they have surnames because they've married.
I love this question from CJ on TikTok, who asks, will Andrew now have to bow to his daughters?
That's another great question. Yes, I think he probably will. Just bow to everybody. That's assuming he's, if he's in the room with the rest of the family. But
do you think he would happily do that?
No, I don't. And I don't think he'll be in any hurry to change that sort of thing.
So his love of deference goes the one way.
Yes, I can't imagine. I mean, there will come a moment. I don't know when it will happen, but suddenly he'll be in some sort of public place, and someone's going to come up to him and address him, hello, Andrew, or something. And in the past, I think we'll do that again. I think let's have it's Your Royal Highness.
Wow.
No, it's not.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, there's the world's smallest violin. There's not much sympathy, but to lose your identity so swiftly, and so that it's been your entire being. What is he now? I'm 56, 55, so he must be 65.
He's 65, yeah.
So
retirement age.
That is quite an identity shift, isn't it, to have to grapple with?
Yeah, although I mean he's had to incrementally over the last X number of years. Certainly came back to 2019 in the Terrible Newsnight interview. He's seen one thing after another going. Titles, then there was some uniforms he could wear, then there are no uniforms he could wear. And I mean, now it's been pared right back. And as I was saying earlier, I mean, I do think that the taking away those honours and effectively categorising him as in the same category as war criminals and enemies of the state, I mean, that's probably what's going to hurt most.
But also, we've had a great question come in, there's so many things that he will now have to think about for the first time. Somebody has asked, will he have to get a passport now? Because I thought it was only the king who didn't have a passport. Did he have one anyway?
Yeah, no, he would have needed a passport.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be doing much travelling, except possibly, I suppose, to to the Middle East, where he's still got sort of a few contacts. I mean, there was, I have to say, about a week ago, I was seriously thinking, and this had been posited in high places, about some form of actual exile, i.e. going to live abroad, and I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, there's only so much time one can sort of sit on a farm in
True, but we had a lot of comments overnight saying, which country would want him. So that's
well, Saudi Arabia springs to mind. I mean, it's got a fairly good record of taking on waifs and strays that nobody else wants. I remember Idi Amin.
It's got a rather questionable record on many other fronts as well. But I want to turn to some of your comments now, and a huge number of you watched and enjoyed last night's show, which was a new interview with Andrew Loney, author of the recent best-selling biography on Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. Like Teresa, who said, "Great show, Joe, and great guest Andrew Loney." Thank you. Well, thank you, Teresa. A shame you recorded just before the dramatic news tonight. Yes, we thought so. Can you please do an emergency extra show tomorrow? On a similar theme, J. Pete Mardre said, "A lot happened in the hours after you produced this Palace Confidential. Your viewers would be appreciative if you produced an additional Palace Confidential to cover these details." Well, you ask, we deliver to you and Teresa and all the others. Here you go. This is why Palace Confidential is really the only royal news source you need to follow. You don't need to go in any other shows, Robert. So this seems like a good time to remind you that if you do want more expert royal news and insight, you really should subscribe to our Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. It's free, and we bring out a couple of episodes of our brilliant shows every week. While you're at it, you can subscribe to our weekly Palace Confidential newsletter. That too is free. We spoil you, and you can sign up using the link below. Another comment from last night's show now. Robert Montgomery wrote, "The royal family isn't throwing Andrew under the bus," as we said in our headline. He, with great glee, threw himself under the bus years ago. Good point, well made. So to some of your questions now, Katerina Bergman asks, why did the late Queen protect Andrew? This one will go down in the history books, won't it, Robert? You wrote a number of books about the late Queen Elizabeth. Tell us about their relationship and why she protected him particularly.
Well, yes, I mean, it's always sort of said he was her favourite. I would always sort of put it a slightly different
weakness?
way. I think she could see he was the most vulnerable of all the children. You look at, the Prince of Wales to be king. I mean, very, very kind of principled man. Who was very confident in his own scheme. Might have been, had run-ins over the years with the establishment on some of the issues. But I mean, Prince Charles was his own man. Princess Anne, unquestionably, Olympian, her own woman, very much.
But it's fascinating that he grew up in the same family that produced these people.
Yeah, well, and Prince Edward is again, he's I think he's trod a very kind of sensible path. He and the Duchess Sophie, they don't throw their weight around, and all you've got to do is, as we in the media do, you often go on these royal trips, or you go around the country, follow them, you talk to people, you talk to Lord Lieutenants, you talk to people in councils, or overseas, you talk to diplomats at embassies or whatever, and they all have very warm things to say about every member of the royal family except Andrew, because he would have this sort of capacity just to sort of barge in and say the first thing that came into his head.
But do you think there's a kind of an irony, isn't there, in that the Queen, as you say, she thought he was the most vulnerable, he was reportedly her favourite. It seems like after all the years of being away for so long, she felt like she really wanted to envelop Andrew. And the irony is that it's just really, that's not been the best thing for him at all.
Well, I mean, it was often described as her second family when Andrew came along, because it was a 10-year age gap since the birth of Princess Anne. And then don't forget, of course, then Edward came along 4 years later in 1964. So they were kind of grew up together as a sort of younger pair. And that was a very different relationship. I mean, she was a more confident monarch. By the time he came along, she'd been on the throne for 8 years. She could sort of say, actually, I'm not going to do this Privy Council meeting or whatever. I'm going to go and it's bath time. And she could take a more modern approach to motherhood, and did. I think also, I mean, you talk to people who, and I have obviously, to people who you know really, really well. I mean, I've interviewed him over the years. I've interviewed all the royal family. I think with him as a young man, particularly, I think she saw in him a lot of Prince Philip. You know, he was this young naval officer who is very good at what he does, and he goes off to fight for his country, and that was a battle. I mean, that's another thing, and I think we have to remember some of the positives with Andrew. I mean, back in 1982, when the task force was setting sail, you have Mrs. Thatcher, Prime Minister, saying, "I don't want this prince going to war because he's going to be a menace. He's going to bring down fire on the people around him. He's a liability," and he was absolutely determined to go. And as the Queen and Prince Philip were very supportive, and I talked to him about it, and he said, Prince Philip was very supportive, but he was absolutely adamant he was going to go and do his bit, and he did. And so I think, having seen that happen, I think the Queen was, felt that he'd sort of earned his place in the family. And the other thing, we have talked about this before on this show, and I've talked about it in my podcast, Queens, Kings and Dastardly Things, with Professor Kate Williams. We discussed this whole phenomenon of spares, and Andrew is your classic spare. He's the number two who's there as backup. And the Queen was very sensitive and sympathetic towards spares because her father was a spare and his father was a spare and Princess Margaret was a spare, and it's what explains a lot about her relationship with Harry as well. She could see that being number one comes with all sorts of privileges that she herself enjoyed, and being a runner-up leaves you more exposed. And if you're the sort of slightly gullible, impressionable, in his case sort of feckless individual, that makes you prey for the likes of Jeffrey Epstein.
And look where we are now. Well, Tricia Cool has called in with on our live chat asking a question. It's something we have discussed here many times. What about Council of State? Surely Andrew will now be removed.
Well, again, who knows? But it doesn't need to happen. It's not something that matters. He's never going to be called upon to serve as a Councillor of State because there are plenty of others. What they did was, and Councillors of State, for those we should probably explain, it's the if the monarch is ill disposed abroad or ill or whatever.
Yeah, but I think at this point, I think the public would resent the principle of him being on there.
Well, if we go down that route, then we get to the point of he's still in line to the throne. He's still number 8. No, it's almost inconceivable that we would get to that situation. And if we did, well, the precedent is there. 1936, abdication of Edward VIII. Government says, we're not going to put up with you as king. Off you go. Abdicate. So look, if the point came where the only choice was to have Andrew on the throne, I think that would be the end of the monarchy. So we're not going to get to that point. But yeah, people may say, why is he in the line of succession? Why is he a Councillor of State?
Robert, we've gotten to other points with the monarchy that we both never thought we'd see. So you just don't know, do you? I have another question now from Susan M asking, will the line of succession be modified? But you're saying not.
I don't think so, because it doesn't. Again,
Robert also said last week that Andrew wouldn't lose his titles.
I don't. I mean, I didn't say he wouldn't. I said it would be a
unlikely,
very. I said it would be an extraordinary thing for him to lose his titles, because effectively it's saying you are. You're on a par with a war criminal. Well, and here we are now, and he has lost them. So I've learned many times over the years of covering this story. You just sort of never say never.
Yeah, indeed. I think that will be the next part of this conversation that doesn't go away. Where he is in the line of succession.
I think you're probably right. Yeah. I think but I think the appetite. Yeah. The media cycle, the public sort of cycle, and it's the public appetite for this stuff. Everyone has been circling Royal Lodge metaphorically now for weeks, sort of demanding, Andrew's head on a pole, and they've sort of got it. So I think it's going to calm down from
They've sort of got it. Jack Martin on TikTok has a great question. Does this also mean that he's not entitled to a state funeral?
He was never entitled to a state funeral.
Oh, okay.
The only people who get state funerals are the monarch and very, very special people who are voted through by Parliament, like Winston Churchill.
God forbid Sir David Attenborough, I would say, on that day.
That will be a very interesting. I'm sure let's not go there. David Attenborough, Order of Merit, Order of everything. His initials are colossal. He's such a great man that I don't even want to think about that.
No, I agree with you. Now, Rich Lan asks, of the constant stream of Andrew news, will this drip, drip, drip continue? What do you think, Robert?
Yes, and it's not a drip, drip, drip. As I said the other day, it's a thud, thud, thud. I mean, it just gets, louder and muckier and murkier. So, I don't have access to this great cache of files in America. Clearly, there is more stuff there.
I mean, and let's just let you make the point that it's not Andrew information that's in those files. So,
there's loads of other stuff in there, and it's an enormous global scandal, and I mean, it's anyone who's had any sort of proximity to Epstein seems to be ultimately it does for them. I mean, look at our former ambassador to Washington.
Well,
we
indeed,
haven't heard about
Peter
him
Mandelson.
for a bit.
Yeah.
Peter Mandelson. There's someone else who's paid the price. I think, it's probably over to the US for the next instalment of this.
Now, Petula Ronderstadt says, so much excellent material for The Crown seasons 7 and 8. Are there already any plans in this regard? Now, Robert, you've covered and debunked a lot of The Crown in the past. Can you see this coming up? Or I always thought it wouldn't even go on for this long.
No, they reached the producers of The Crown. Peter Morgan got to the point of essentially to 2005 and the sort of the marriage of then Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles, and that was their kind of cut-off point, because I think they realised that if they went any further, then legally they'd be, they really would be exposing themselves to the full wrath of the younger royals, not least William and Harry.
Yes.
No, I think The Crown won't. But I mean, as we've seen, we've had 2 dramas.
And that was just about the Newsnight
interview. So I have absolutely no doubt that as we speak, there are various stage plays, TV dramas, film dramas, books, fiction, semi-fiction, all being worked around.
Are you writing your Netflix show?
No, I'm writing another book actually, but I'm not going into this too much. But I probably might have to.
You'll be sick of talking about this. Let's talk about housing. We understand that Andrew himself triggered the end of his lease. Presumably a deal that had been reached with Charles. Was it his idea, or do you think he was persuaded to have the idea? I
think he was persuaded and left with no alternative. I mean, as I wrote in my book on the King, there was a reveal this last year that the King had offered him a very good deal, which was to move out of Royal Lodge, retain his allowance and live quietly in Frogmore Cottage. And Andrew turned it down, said, no, I'm going to do it my way, I'm going to stay put. And the King said, well, you've got some very big bills you're going to have to pay. And he went, oh no, I'll sort it out, I'll do some deals, I'm going to stay there. And I think what he's realised now is that those bills are beyond payment. I mean, they're going to mount up and up and up. Whatever residual prospects he had of a business career, that's gone in the last few weeks.
Because also, everyone's been outraged at this so-called peppercorn rent, but that's to say nothing of the upkeep of the place as well.
I mean, again, in his defence, and there's not much to say in his defence, but there are some things, and we should say them. But I mean, it's what they call a repairing lease, and he had spent, I think, £7 million on that. So actually, the peppercorn rent is one thing, but the money spent is another. But it was just long term. It was completely unfeasible for him to stay there. And he did, as I said, he had an offer a year ago, and he turned it down. What's changed now, I think, is that public opinion and the latest revelations that he basically hadn't been telling the full truth have materially changed the King's view and everybody else's view, and that is why he's not going to.
And his financial prospects.
Well, he's not going to Frogmore Cottage. Actually, I think mainly because the King doesn't want him. It's still a complicated one, Frogmore Cottage, but it is on the Crown Estate. It's a sort of Crown Estate property, and it's aligned with the castle, and it therefore. You could argue there's an element of public money, involved in protecting it because it's inside the security cordon. The people could make the case that Andrew was somehow benefiting off the public purse by moving him, as the King has decided last night, by moving him to Sandringham, which is an entirely private estate. It doesn't get any money from the taxpayer. It's like putting, somebody in the shed at the bottom of your garden. I mean, it does not.
So he becomes the king's kept man.
He becomes a tenant on the
Right.
Sandringham estate. Whether he behaves like one is another matter, but that's where he is.
So he's going from this 30-room grand country house for, as you said, somewhere on the Sandringham estate. I read this morning most of these places have 5 bedrooms.
Yes, I mean it'll. I'm sure it'll be what you and I would regard as a perfectly nice house. It'll be definitely a step down for him, unless there are 1 or 2 grand houses on the estate, but I don't think they'll be putting him in one of them.
We don't know which one it is yet.
No, well, one that is available is Park House, which is a fairly substantial pile, which is actually where Diana, Princess of Wales, was born. Her father leased it when she was a little girl. But I don't think, that's sort of hotel-sized, and I don't think he'll be getting that one.
Do we know when this move's going to happen?
Yes, we know when it's not happening this weekend.
Okay.
I mean, it'll be over the next, it's a big house move, so it'll be a matter of, I would have thought, certainly weeks and a few months.
Really? So maybe not before Christmas?
No,
Yeah.
not before Christmas. And frankly, maybe it's just as well you don't really want him on the Sandringham estate at Christmas when the rest of the family are up there.
True. Well, one curious aspect of Andrew's life is that he has lived all this time with his ex-wife. And now we've heard all sorts of reports last week about whether or not Sarah would get a property in Windsor and so on. There was talk about give me Adelaide Cottage, etc.
No way.
But we're now told she'll find her own place. What was the cold phrasing?
The phrasing was the Duchess will make her own arrangements.
Yes.
No, those arrangements may involve the Duke. The ex-Duke. Here we go again.
Yeah.
May involve Mr.
Takes some getting used to.
May involve Mr.
Yeah.
Mountbatten Windsor. They may not. Everything to do with their finances has always been fairly opaque. There was the sale of their marital home for $3 million over the asking price, the chalet in Verbier. Maybe there's some money there to buy something, buy a place. Maybe they'll carry on living together. But don't forget, they both lived in Berkshire, in the sort of the home counties close to London. That's been their home for, in her case, for her entire life. I mean, she grew up in Sunningdale. She's a Berkshire girl. So is she going to want to suddenly become a Norfolk girl? Don't know.
What is she going to do? Because as far as I can see, her leverage and her ability to make money has always been connected to her royal ties, her Duchess of York title. What's she going to do?
We'll have to wait and see. I mean, she did have some sort of books in the pipeline. I mean, I think, and I was listening on the radio earlier today.
Who will want to give her a contract after the recent revelations?
Not right now, but
Yeah.
how does it pan out? I mean, maybe if there was some sort of contrition, if people can reinvent themselves, people can come back from these things. I mean, we live in a society that does try and bring people back from the brink. I mean, she hasn't been, formally charged or accused or sentenced of anything. I mean,
Sure.
she's just very bad judgment. Perhaps in time, maybe some sort of penance, some sort of charity work, and maybe she'll come back.
I don't know. I think you say bad judgment, but I just think I think what sticks with people is somebody who's aligned with so many children's charities, happily carrying on a relationship with somebody who they know is convicted of sex offences. I just think that's what I think it is.
Yeah, I don't. Whatever she does, she's not going to go back into that sort of space. I mean, after she parted company with the Duke first time around, she had quite a lucrative contract as an ambassador for Weight Watchers, I seem to remember.
Oh yes.
I mean, who knows? And as they enter a new phase of life, maybe it's some sort of ambassador for something a little more at the sort of twilight years themed, perhaps.
Points for optimism, Robert. Now, we've got a poll. Thank you to over 500 of you that have voted in that very short space of time, the previous poll. 64% say Beatrice and Eugenie should keep their titles. And we now have a poll asking whether you think it's time Andrew left the country and moved abroad. So vote for that, and remember to please do like this video. It really does help more people to see it. Now, Andrew, as we've discussed, Robert, is a man who loves title, he loves ceremony, he loves being royal. presumably this is a big personal blow. Do you think he'll be... My hunch is that he'll just be furious with the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I think, when you are someone who really does stand on ceremony, and he loves all that stuff, he always has been very keen on, even as we saw in that creepy email to Epstein that came out the other day, still signs it at the end, Andrew, Duke of York, KG.
Yeah.
He loves all that, and he was used to like flying his royal standard above his house. I don't think he'll be flying any standard above the new tenant property in Norfolk, if indeed it has a flagpole.
He might give it a go.
He might. I mean, maybe he'll in the privacy of his own home, he might still sort of put on his garter robes and walk around the garden. I mean, I don't know, but
there's an image.
It will be when you're within the sort of royal world, things like honours, I mean, they really matter in a way that we might think we might not really get it, but they all through history, things like the Garter, Order of the Garter, have been a huge deal for royals, and particularly those on the fringes. If you're in the front line, if you're the monarch, you're in line to the throne, or you're close to it, you're possibly more relaxed about these things. But I mean, when
because you're not fighting for them.
All he really had left was things like the Garter, and he was still. Well, it meets every year, the Order of the Garter. It's the oldest order of chivalry in the world. It's the great and the good. It's very eminent, but also members of the family get installed, as they say. And then they process down through Windsor Castle, and they have a service at St George's Chapel. He had tried to continue taking part in that service, in that procession, and then that was stopped. It was sort of after COVID, when the procession resumed, it was like, no, actually, we don't want you here. But he was still allowed to come to the lunch. They have this lunch at the castle, and he loved going to the lunch. And then finally, the lunch invitation stopped, and everything, that mantelpiece is just looking very bad.
So it's been a real sort of like drip of demotions, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think so? A lot of people say it's been a long time coming. Do you think it's in any part because the king just didn't want to hurt his brother?
Well, I think we have to again go back to just sort of strip it back to what are we talking about here? What is he guilty of? What is he not guilty of? What are the actual charges? And because things are so imprecise, I mean, it's a lot easier to deal with a situation where X has happened, Y has happened. There's some clear
I
pivot
suppose
point.
It's just unfortunate that he paid £12 million to a woman he's never met.
Yeah. Back in 2022, that was in the last reign. So I mean, we can't. That was just in the run-up to the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And again, people will say, well, in court cases, this is sometimes what companies, what people do is they pay off irksome litigants. Well, that is not going to wash.
No.
Not now. No, I mean, you don't pay that sort of money to someone you've never met. And then it turns out, as again the Mail on Sunday had been showing, that actually he did seem to know who she was.
Yes, indeed. Now, presumably for the king, this will be, I mean, obviously, such an understatement. So it's a real test of being a monarch, isn't it? When
I think this has been the toughest decision of his reign.
It reminds me of my history lesson from The Crown, when Queen Elizabeth had to separate family and state to forbid Princess Margaret from marrying. Can't remember his name.
Group Captain Townsend.
Thank you. But
except she didn't. But anyway,
but
another thing the Crown gets wrong. Let's not go there.
Okay, well, it feels like that kind of thing again, where I have to separate my duty as a monarch and my duty as a brother. It's really tough.
It is tough. It's when you are monarch, your loyalty to the institution outweighs your loyalty to individuals. It has to, and however painful that is. I mean, the late Queen found it incredibly difficult to take away Andrew's, back in 2019, to essentially force him to leave public life. I mean, that was a really, for her, she was a Princess of York, let's not forget. Her father was Duke of York. It's such a precious thing to her. And she was so pleased to give it to Andrew on his wedding day in 1986, so that the Dukedom of York lives on. And all of a sudden, it's sort of tainted. and gradually, you know, she loved being Colonel of the Grenadiers, and she'd made him Colonel of the Grenadiers in succession to Prince Philip. He'd taken on a lot of the things that Prince Philip had relinquished on his retirement and then his death, and again, for the Queen to have to watch all that being unravelled was very painful. So I mean, you know, as far as she was concerned, things had reached rock bottom. But of course, they've had a lot. There's been a much further, longer, deeper drop.
What do you think all of his siblings will be thinking? Not just Charles, but you know, Anne and Edward. Will it be concern? Will it be sympathy? Will it be anger? Will it be all of the above?
I think it's all of the above, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be exasperation. I mean, how could he have done this? How could he be so stupid? All that. But I think at the same time, probably a genuine, you know, is he all right? Because you know, I think to have gone through, I think this would test. We'd hear a lot about mental health, but I mean, this would test mental health of anybody.
Are they close to him in that way? Will they be looking after him?
I think they'll be looking out for him rather
Right.
than looking after him. I mean, I think the people who are closest to him are his ex-wife and his daughters in particular. And you know, they will be, I think, they'll be keeping the closest watch. And you know, we're in a sort of funny phase now, because he's still obviously going to be at Royal Lodge for the next few weeks, months, while things are sort of packed up before he moves. But you know, it's what. You know, we're in the sort of, you know, February, March. There he is sitting up at Sandringham. What is there to do? I mean, and obviously, our colleagues in the media are definitely not going to lose any interest in him. So, you know, is he going to be seen out and about on a horse? Is he going to be sort of driving around the estate? Will he have a gun in his hand? Is he going to go rabbit shooting, or you know, will he decide to go and, I don't know, play golf? Probably will.
Well, from the emotional welfare to the physical, Jack asks, I've been wondering this, what will happen to his royal protection? Will he now need to fund his own security? Because I can imagine in the wake of all this as well, there might be bigger threats to his security.
Well, he doesn't really have security, because he doesn't perform public duties. I mean, you know, royalty, they never comment on security, but I mean, it's always on a sort of case-by-case basis. But I suspect if he was going into any sort of public-facing situation, it's highly unlikely, but they would definitely want someone, you know, keeping an eye on him. Not a full-time protection, but there's definitely an argument that he is. Yeah, you're right. The risk would be heightened. I mean, if he were to sort of, I don't know, wander into a crowded railway station or an airport to try and get on a plane, can you imagine the reaction?
So wherever he moves to, will he be kind of, you know, encased in the Windsor bubble of
we'll
security?
have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, but he is at the moment. I mean, he's pretty well insulated, I think, from the outside world, and I wouldn't imagine that's going to change.
Now, you've written a biography about the King, and what did you learn about his relationship with his brother? Because from the outside, it doesn't, not that they don't like each other, but it doesn't look particularly.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
there's a big difference in age. They're 12 years apart. You know, by the time the sort of Andrew was at school, I mean, Charles was sort of at university and on his way doing, you know, to being a sort of full-time royal. So I think they were probably at their closest in the early years of their respective marriages, because I think at the time they could both sort of see what the other had been through, and they weren't that far apart in that regard. It was only, you know, Charles and Diana married in 1981. Andrew and Fergie married in 1986, and in fact it was the late Diana who sort of brought them together over lunch at Windsor in Asker Week, and they actually bonded over eating profiteroles. And it was Diana who'd sort of thought, oh, you know, maybe this is someone for Andrew, and they did go on the odd holiday together. So I think, and the children sort of grew up similar sort of ages. So I think in those years there was a sort of proximity, but over time, you know, particularly as the Prince of Wales became more and more, you know, had bigger duties and was sort of taking on more of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Andrew's going in the opposite direction, leaves the Navy in 2001. It's pretty aimless, gets this sort of nebulous trade envoy job. And really,
and by all reports, is having a jolly old time, really.
Well, is you know, it's I imagine, you know, he's a wise guy, the King, and he's well plugged in. He hears what's going on. He would have picked up on the grapevine, when these ambassadors or whatever were sort of rolling their eyes and tearing their hair out because Andrew had just done something stupid, he would have heard all about it.
Do you think that had Andrew fallen on his sword, as it were, a bit earlier, agreed to the King's deal to move out of Royal Lodge, he would have had a much nicer place than where he's ending up now?
I think it would have certainly helped if he'd taken the King's offer over a year ago and moved out of Royal Lodge. I think that would have drawn some of it. But I think the debate, in light of the latest revelations by our sister paper, the Mail on Sunday, I think that would have moved things on. I think there probably would have been a cry, what's he still doing on the estate? So I don't know. I think it would have just taken some of the heat out of the debate, because so much of the heat has been about his absolute, determination to stay in this huge house, and that debate would have gone.
We've got another question now from Saleha M, who asks, could the King give the Duke of York title to anybody else?
Yes, as we've discussed, anything could happen. It's highly unlikely while there are other members of the House of York, but I mean, as it were, the Dukedom of York has been created, as they say, several times. But I think it would be highly unlikely while there are still descendants of the last dukedom to have a new one.
Okay, so
you wait, but in years to come.
So it's a dormant one for this generation.
It's dormant. I mean, will anyone actually want it now? After it had historically, it's been some slightly kind of ropey ones. Grand Old Duke of York, George III's second son again. But then, of course, there have been some great ones, like and notably. The late Queen's father, George VI, he was Duke of York, and the Queen Mum was Duchess of York. So I think it's going to go into the title cupboard and stay there a very long time.
Who is the cheeky commenter who has suggested that our Palace Confidential's Richard Eden should be the Duke of York? I mean, I just the commenters do their best to make Richard's head swell and swell every week. I'm glad he's not here to hear that. We'll go to the polls now. So far, 64% of you say Andrew should leave the country. Do keep voting. Let us know where he should be going in the comments. Gosh, which poor country is in for it?
Well, I did mention Saudi. I think
people keep mentioning that. Yes,
Juan Carlos of Spain, actually, when he
indeed. Yes, we discussed that yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, Andrew and Fergie will finally stop living together after more than 30 years.
Well, will they?
After they split up. Well, it seems like neither of them want to share a much smaller house. But it could be a good thing for them to live apart, could it not?
It could be. I mean, on the other hand, depends. It's quite lonely up there in the wilds of Norfolk when it's sort of out of season, as it were. I think the other thing is, they are both Sarah and Andrew. They're very close to their daughters and they're very close to their grandchildren. Their grandchildren live in the sort of Windsor, home counties, Thames Valley orbit, and they'll want to see. They'll want to keep close to them. So I think it's an interesting one. I think there'll probably be a lot of driving up and down the M11.
Well, we mentioned yesterday on the show he does have friends, particularly wealthy foreign royals, who've offered him accommodation in the Middle East. And now Sandy on YouTube has asked, what about the palace he was gifted by the Arabian royalty? Don't tell me he could end up in an even bigger palace. Well,
there are reports that he, I don't know whether gifted, given, leased, lent, borrowed, whatever. There is supposedly a property that he can withdraw to I think in the United Arab Emirates, in Abu Dhabi, something like that. He did all those years of doing deals in that part of the world. He'll still, of course, he'll have sort of friends and contacts there. I suspect no one is going to want to really have very much to do with him in the short term. But he's got a long life ahead of him. He's only 65. He's fit. He's teetotal. He's going to be around a long time. So I think if he's sensible, and that's a big if, obviously, but lie low, show some contrition, maybe start to try and look at ways of rebuilding life. But it's not going to happen quickly, and it's going to require, I think, an awful lot of humble pie.
Indeed. Now, wherever he does if he does end up living outside of the UK, Do you think there could be a diplomatic price to pay to us for having another country keep an eye on him, so to speak?
As to do with everything, as we keep saying, to do with Andrew and the Epstein saga, it all depends where the story goes, and where are we in a year's time, 5 years' time? Maybe as the sort of the spotlight moved elsewhere, has there been some sort of exoneration, or has the plot thickened? Has it got murkier, and do things look even more bleak and tawdry? It will all depend on that. But he does have contacts in countries that, shall we say, take a pretty dim view of a free press and human rights. So maybe some of those might be an option.
Right. Well, there have been many comments, including Coco, Melody and Andrea in the live chat, asking whether this means that Harry and Meghan could also have their titles, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, removed too. Surely not. No,
I mean, I think let's not conflate two completely different situations. I mean, I know that obviously the Sussexes have their issue with the monarchy, but I mean this is just it's completely different. And they're leading kind of their own independent lives, and I think as long as they're in some way happy, I think the king will be happy.
Well, Anna asks if there's any irony in the fact that the last time you came out, you pointed out that things like, this Order of the Garter have been taken away, so the bar's been lowered.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's the precedent, like I say, is there to. Previously, I mean, there was this, I think we talked about it on the show a while back, there was this sort of medieval spectacle called the ceremony of degradation, when a Knight of the Garter would literally have their banner and their helmet and their shield sort of kicked into the gutter. We haven't gone that far, but the precedent has been set that if you seriously let down the royal side, then these things that I think a lot of, over the years, members of the family took for granted can be taken away.
There's an interesting question from Jan come through now, that can Andrew actually cope as a normal private citizen?
Well, I wouldn't know him well enough to know, what would happen if he went down to Tesco to, buy some milk. I suspect so. People might have a few harsh words.
Mishearing that question, I was very interested in whether or not he can actually cope, but then apparently the question was, can he vote?
Vote. Yes, he can vote. I don't think he would, but yes, he's entitled to. I mean, the monarch can't vote. But that was the thought. Maybe he could stand for the local council in Norfolk and, I don't know, do something useful. Not sure he'd get many votes.
It's kind of like it'd be an amazing sitcom, wouldn't it? Watching a royal sort of like go to normal life.
I mean, there was that years ago. Sue Townsend wrote that book, Imagining a Republic, where the Queen's gone to live in a council house. I mean, I'm sure in the creative world, people are thinking up all these various scenarios, and I mean, I'm quite sure that, as we said earlier, there have been two dramas just on the Newsnight interview. The fall of the House of York is going to be a rich theme for quite a while.
Now, we were talking about speculating about whether or not all the arrangements with Andrew and Royal Lodge would sort of motivate parliamentarians to sort of like scrutinise more of the accommodation arrangements of royals. Do you think that might sort of like die down now?
No, I'm not sure. I think some MPs have now sort of got the bit between their teeth and will feel that actually, we've sort of the question has been raised. The public expect to see greater scrutiny. I mean, the fact is that the Public Accounts Committee and some of these other committees, they have looked at the royal finances quite a lot over the years. I mean, God, way back in the 70s, I mean, there was a full select committee just on the royal finances. It's not, I think people have this idea that all royal finances are ring-fenced and nobody can go near them and they're sort of protected. there are certain protections they have, but most of it is, I mean, the accounts of the Duchy of Lancaster, I mean, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster sits in the cabinet as a government politician. So I suspect there will be a greater appetite to scrutinise these things.
And
but I just think a particular interesting point is right now the monarchy is in the middle of the most expensive project ever that it's ever undertaken, spending vast sums of money on the restoration of Buckingham Palace. And yet it is a drop in the ocean compared to the projected spend on the Palace of Westminster. I mean, I think the royal spend is going to be about 350 million when it's finished, but the Palace of Westminster is going to be billions. So at the same time that the MPs are looking at the royal finances, I think there's possibly a few things they might want to learn, because actually so far the restoration of the palace is on time and on budget.
But do you think though as well, given that we now have this situation that we didn't actually think we'd see, where he's been stripped, he's becoming Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, do you think that a lot of parliamentarians, politicians who thought the royals were untouchable might feel a bit more emboldened to raise more questions, to review the royals' parliamentary privilege situation? Yeah,
I mean, I think there will be certainly an appetite among some. I mean, there's a large Labour majority, plenty of Republicans sitting there. It's interesting that the parties that seem most vocal on this actually are not the Labour Party. It's the SNP and the Green Party, both of whom are avowedly Republican parties, which Labour are not. It'll largely be down to, I think, what the Prime Minister, what appetite has he got for sort of opening up a kind of whole royal debate. I sense not much, but we live in a free society. I mean, the media is constantly sort of trying to find out more about the royal finances. I suspect there won't be a sort of sudden, open sesame moment where everything gets thrown open, but these things move incrementally. But going back to my point, this is the biggest crisis since '92. At the end of '92, and there have been all these crises, and it started actually with the Yorks' separation, their marriage falling apart, photographs of the Duchess with someone who wasn't the Duke.
Andrew's always in there somewhere.
Exactly, and then we had the Andrew Morton book, and we had endless rows about the War of the Waleses, as it was called, and everything else. But it all came to a head at the end of the year. The Queen did a Anna Cerebral speech, and what happened? Within days, there was an announcement that the Queen was going to pay tax.
That's
that was
true.
a complete non sequitur, nothing to do with collapsed marriages or a fire in the castle. But all these things had sort of got to a point, and the Queen felt something had to give. And there'd been this ongoing row about why does she not pay tax, and it was a historical thing. I mean, there were all sorts of complicated reasons, and actually the government were quite happy for her not to pay tax. But anyway, she said, no, I want to clear the air, I'm going to do this. And I feel that we're in that sort of same situation where a sort of private royal matter has just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and everyone's shouting about lots of different things, whether it's money or Andrew or whatever. And so the King has said, right, I'm going to sort this.
I'll tell you something, in all the time of doing this show, I remember when we started it, we said, well, is there really enough royal news to do a show every week?
I've got to go
and
write
here
some
we are,
now,
sometimes
Joe.
we need to do 3 or 4 episodes a week. This has been absolutely brilliant to spend this time with you. Thank you so much for all your knowledge. Thank you so much for liking, commenting and joining us for this special last-minute live show. Thank you for contributing to our polls and for being here. We really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Robert. We'll put a link to your book on Charles and the late Queen in the description below. And look out next week for a special interview with another royal biographer. And we'll see you next Thursday for our regular Palace Confidential show. Bye for now.